Ecosystems in the Sahel are particularly vulnerable to climate impacts, but the Gambia's capital city, Banjul, which is highly vulnerable to climate change and among the list of top cities likely to disappear by 2100, is at even greater risk.
If there is no mangroves plantation or there is no tree plantation, within 2100, Banjul will be normal.
Why is Banjul so vulnerable?
Because Banjul is a highland. So an highland is vulnerable to sea level rise.
In 2002, the government of the Gambia spent $200 million to replenish the coastline in the country's first coastal protection program. Coastlines are crucial livelihood providers, and a vast majority of women depend on the estuary around the island of Banjul for income, and records have shown how their livelihoods have been taken away by the impacts of climate change. Evidently, there is growing public interest in environmental issues. Locals are losing land to salt, natural disasters are apparent, and there is infinite extraction of the country's finite resources, which has given rise to ecosystem damages and, in some cases, conflict in communities across the country. Along the island of Banjul lies robust ecosystem goods and services that drive the livelihoods of most local populations, especially indigenous groups who are experiencing these adverse effects and despite incapacity to fully understand the global dynamics of climate talks and large-scale solutions for best practices to enhance resilience to climate change. Local advocacy group Tri-Oyster Women Association, which brings together 500 women from 15 villages in the Greater Banjul area, is trying to change that with a scheme grouping women into cooperatives to exchange sustainable oyster harvesting techniques and learn the benefits of environmentally responsible resource management.
We have oyster culture farming we are trying to develop. The oyster culture farming is like a farm, like you have your granite farm, and you are now you build the rafts and then you put the oyster shells. Oysters, they attach on any hard surface. Like if you left this boat somewhere and leave it there, the oyster eggs will come attach on it, and then you have oysters. So now that's what we are trying to. It's a pilot program we have done before, and we are now continuing. We thought that it was good, although it took a longer time to harvest. But at least the women don't have to navigate inside the river to get the oysters.
These women from the Tri-Oyster Association harvest oysters seasonally. That's a bumper yield every 4 months, and during that interval, they engage in fishing, fetching cockles, and other marine activities.
Because of too much rains, the oysters are not. When they have too much rains and we have less rains, it affects the growth of the oysters. So when there is drought, the oysters are not, they don't feed well. And when there is too much rain, they don't feed. Because they feed, oysters, they are filter feeders.
The fact that their lives entirely depend on this estuary sends a wave of uncertainty about what could happen when the city gets inundated as predicted.
Amatut kon num dan ame yohos bi mom reetut comme num dan re te bu ñeka dañ ko dan yohos continuer duñ dan tej way fum nekane suñu yoxosé ñaari wër dañ am pour tej mayat ko ba benen at waaw
geej bi la su démé ba dem ba ci kaw nonu ñun dinañ jaxlé te yaakaaruñu ko fenn itam na jaxlé rek.
The famous alternative here is to resort to house help jobs, as most of them did before discovering this means of sustaining a living. But even that is dicey. These women are well trained in what they do, and they're willing to go the extra mile just to be able to get something for their families, even if it takes them just swimming through the waters and just going to where they're supposed to go to get that done. Great Institute works to strengthen marine and coastal observation and data systems to protect the livelihoods of vulnerable coastal communities in the Gambia. Their work is entirely done at sea, and their findings have been useful in strengthening inundation theories.
Due to the rainy season, we realized that there is an increase in turbidity. An increase in turbidity caused by excess flow of fertilizer into the riverside, and then when there's excess flow of fertilizer into the riverside, and then caused by increase in temperature, then there's a less dissolved oxygen in the water. And in that note, you find out there's less organisms being inside the river.
GREAT does not only work in observing and producing data to determine climate interventions. Their team of technicians and officers also provide scientific knowledge that is especially meaningful to increasing understanding of the Gambia's marine and coastal environment. The Gambia's National Development Plan outlines green growth strategies involving adaptation to new climate constraints, preserving and enhancing food production, while protecting the environment and reducing greenhouse gas emissions from agriculture, alongside incorporate smart agriculture as per the agro-development agenda in accordance with SDGs. Whilst this is a beautiful approach to creating synergies with neighboring countries like Senegal, Guinea and Mali, the growing concern over the depleting forest cover, which continues to affect sea level rise in the coast amidst massive urbanization, must be treated with urgency.
Through its policies and strategic document, government have recognized that we are vulnerable, highly vulnerable to climate change. So it started from there. Then it developed policies and strategy. Foremost among them is the National Climate Change Policy that recommends the country to be resilient on climate change, to be taking action for adaptation as well as mitigation.
The Gambia has developed a national climate change policy with support from the EU. The fact that the Gambia is an LDC means that priority loans more towards adaptation than mitigation, and locals need to resonate with national priorities so they can collectively move towards a more resilient society.
We have one which was, it has ended, is protected the coast and building resilience of the coastal community. It's a UNDP JEF project which was for 2016, I think, to 2018. It is ended. Now we have another one, EBA, large-scale ecosystem-based project.
The NDP has acknowledged that about 92 square kilometers of the coastal zone, including the city of Banjul, will be inundated, and the mangrove systems on St. Mary's Island and Combo St. Mary, which local communities depend on for oysters and other forms of livelihoods, will be lost mid-century. This has prompted environment activists like INCE to mobilize and encourage locals to engage in mangrove restoration exercises.
Since 2009, we have been engaging in massive mangrove restoration projects and exercises. So we are able to plant at least 3 million mangrove propagules, covering an area of more than 5 kilometers, or more than 170 hectares are already restored.
Mangroves provide essential habitats for thousands of species. They also stabilize shorelines, preventing erosion and protecting the land, as well as the people who live there from waves and storms. Recent years have seen the depletion of this resource for the use of firewood and other household needs. But could the restoration and replanting of mangroves in any way prevent inundation projections? Perhaps it only contributes to building resilience and just buying more time. These women who depend on the coastal zones for their means of survival might only be happy for a period of time. And even though they are encouraged to travel in groups or at least in pairs to prevent accidents, what would become of their children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren are questions activists and civil societies are putting to world leaders at COP26 as young people fight to restore the once green world from the devastating effects of human-induced exploitation.